Okay, I
Hello?
can join. Shall I kick it off?
Hello?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, let me know if I can kick it off.
Yes, you can.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Marina. Hi, everybody. My name is Balbodh. I am a staff product manager at Smartsheet. It's a company based out of US. We operate in a project management tools, work management tools space. I am based out of London. I used to work before Smartsheet with Amazon and McKinsey. I have over a decade of experience in product management, engineering, and business. Um, I I have worked in energy tech, in finance, in video streaming at Amazon Prime Video, and I've also been now in a completely like B2B enterprise SaaS product. So I'm excited to be here and share what I have learned through my experience with all of you. Uh, what we will do is, and I'll talk about what the topic of discussion today is, and we'll go through a lot of like frameworks that and litmus tests that we think are really important in the product management space that you can use and leverage. So without further ado, let me kick this off. So, first of all, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining me today and giving me this opportunity to talk about something that's really has helped me in my experience. We are going to deep dive into a reality of product management. For those of you who are looking to transition into this field, or are or have already started and are probably looking to upskill, there's a common misconception that a PM's job is simply to come up with great visionary ideas and hand them off to engineers to build. But today, we're going to take a look at exactly what separates an average product manager from an exceptional product leader, measuring true success and ROI of your product. So it's roughly an hour, and I'll be spending like about 50 minutes on the content and leave it 10 minutes for questions and answers for all of you. You will have a strategic framework that will make you stand out in interviews, and maybe in your first 90 days of the job, or whatever way these tools can basically help. Um, so let's start with the hard truth. In the fast-paced world of tech and product development today, a lot of teams are consistently falling into the trap of celebrating outputs rather than outcomes. What does that mean? It means a team works for, let's say, 6 months on a massive new feature, launches it, celebrates the launch, and immediately moves on to the next item on the roadmap. From an engineering team's perspective, it's great. They celebrate the fact that they did work. But as a product manager, you are not simply paid to generate activity, right? You are paid to generate value. And if you only focus on the outputs, you become what the industry calls a feature factory, where you just create um, something without thinking what in the end it's going to be, what's the value of it. You're churning out code without knowing if it actually solves a real user problem. And this is the reason that the brilliant teams fall into this trap, is because the outputs are incredibly easy to measure. Like if somebody asks you, what did you do in 2025 across your quarters, you can very quickly say, I launched this, I launched this, I launched that great feature. We measure success by numbers of features shipped, agile story points completed, how many Jira tickets did we actually deliver on, how many bugs did we close. The another interesting one these days is with AI is how many pull requests did we submit on GitHub, and cumulative growth charts that only go up and to the right. But here is a fundamental problem. Shipping is an illusion of success if isn't tied to the right metrics. You can execute perfectly, launch 100 features, flawlessly in time, and still have a product that fails in the market because nobody actually needs those 100 features. So doing this is really, really important. I'm introducing all of these before we even drop into what we are going to talk about today, but this is just to get you to start thinking about what is really important in this space. So let's look at real world example enterprise scenario, right? What happens when you have record sales, aggressive shipping velocity from your engineering team, and yet zero net growth. We call this the flat growth mystery. So imagine your sales teams and marketing teams are bringing in like 10,000 new users per month. Your engineering team is shipping updates every single week, but your total active user base, stays something around the same number, let's say stuck at 50,000. Why? Because you may have a leaky bucket. Like users, you are only focused on like new users, but old users are maybe abandoning your product just as fast as they join. This proves that we cannot rely on shipping velocity or top of the funnel sales as our ultimate measure of product health. um, to solve mysteries like flat growth, we need a fundamentally different approach in, right? So in this session today, we are going to build a framework for ruthless metric prioritization. We will cover how to identify deceptive vanity metrics, pivot your roadmap to actual target leading indicators, and measure what actually drives product adoption and attention. So this is the exact sort of mindset shift you need to demonstrate to hiring managers and future stakeholders to prove you are ready to drive like real product strategy work. Um so to kick it off, let's talk about this first topic here, like the output versus the outcome illusion. Um so let's formalize this distinction. I think we talked about this in the beginning slide, but what actually is it? So an output is the thing, the widget, the code, the redesigned page, right? You input your work, your hard work, your thought process, and you build something, right? You deliver something. You use your hands, you use wood, use the tools, and you build something with, as a in woodworking, right? You build a house. But then that's output, right? You put something in, something comes out. The outcome, however, is the measurable change in customer behavior that drives business value. So, as an example, and just using a real life example, you built a house, but if nobody is living in it, or you're not using it for anything, it's not really valuable. And you spend time on doing something that it gave you happiness, but it was not valuable for the world. But as a product manager, what you build has to be valuable for its end users. So your job as a PM is to align your engineering, design, and business teams around true value creation. When you write a product specification, you shouldn't just say we need to build a chatbot because everybody else is. You should say our goal is to reduce customer support resolution time by 30%, and we hypothesize that a chatbot is probably the best vehicle to achieve that outcome, or the best way to achieve that outcome. And so if you see the difference between output and outcome in here is a lot of the output is what does the product look like? Releasing a mobile app or adding an AI customer support agent. The outcome is, are customers able to do purchases 15% faster? Are users logging in twice as often per week? Is there a 20% drop in manual data export requests? So now, when you take a look at all of this together, you are very able to clearly see which one's the more helpful one. If you keep focusing on the output, it's not going to take us anywhere. But if you focus on the outcome, a lot of the output suddenly start making sense because you want to do this, like from an outcome perspective. You could have very different outputs. You can have either redesign the page, either add stuff to a lot of situations. And so just give me a second. I'm going to put myself in do not disturb. So the output and the outcome difference is really, really important for any product manager to know. It's the first thing. If you are working in a really good product company, and if you go ahead and bring a product spec document that you're supposed to do, and it does not mention the value or the outcome, it's just going to be get thrown out of the window. That's the hard truth of the situation. Now the next one. So let's say you understand the difference between actually, no, let's say you do not understand the difference between output and outcome. There's a famous saying in product management, right, regarding this illusion that speed without direction is just a faster way to arrive at the wrong destination. Imagine yourself standing in the middle of a circle, and you can walk really, really fast. But if you don't know where you want to go, and if you walk really, really fast, you can arrive at any point, on the circle. But that's not useful. Like in life, you want to go somewhere because you have a reason to go somewhere, right? You need to have a direction. And so identifying that reason is going to be the key impact driving area for your product. So you don't just focus on how many releases did I do, right? If you ignore the direction, right, where your company is headed, where the strategy of the company is headed, then you're going to be in a situation where what you are doing is not aligned to the strategy of the company, and you'll be left out, right? Good product managers know what their company strategy is and how what they want to do folds into under the company strategy. So think about preparing for a major pitch or a critical project. If you spend, let's say, 72 hours straight perfectly formatting a slide deck that answers the wrong strategic question, you worked incredibly hard, but the outcome is still a failure, right? So the same applies to software engineering. Your fast coding is a liability if it's pointed at the wrong user problem. And the reason I talk about this is you have heard a lot about Claude or Anthropic and OpenAI and ChatGPT. Everybody's building solutions these days. Everybody's just building something. If it's not tied to an end goal and outcome that is valuable, you're just creating code in this word and wasting storage space essentially. The next one, which we have to know about, is called the vanity trap. Now, to how do we ensure teams have right direction? We as product managers have to be convinced that um, deceptive metrics are the worst thing that you can do to your team and to your career. Right? A vanity metric is a number that looks highly impressive on a press release or a resume. I can tell you how it will look like. It will look like a number that has a B in front of it or an MM for millions or billions. Right? As soon as you add something like that, oh, it looks really heavy and impressive, but it has to have value, right? A vanity metric is a number that looks highly impressive on a press release or a resume, but tells you absolutely nothing about the actual health of your business, right? So, total registered accounts, cumulative apps, downloads, uh, raw page views are classic examples. So, if someone downloads your app, opens it once, hits the experience and deletes it, just because you measured total downloads, your metric will look like it's going up, right? New people coming in, and number of people downloading. And in App Store, when you go and download an app, or if you go to Play Store, Google Play Store, it has number of download. It's a good signal. It's a critical signal. But that number could have been just because of some hype, right? Oh, let's try this product. Oh, everybody's talking about it. You download it, you check it out, and they're like, this is useless. And so you uninstall it. But from the marketing perspective, that number of downloads just goes out on that app page. And at the end of the day, that app goes to the top position because the number of downloads have gone wherever, right? And that works for the legacy of the app. Think about it this way. If you type in F, let's say F or whatever letter you type in, let's you type I, Instagram is going to be the first suggestion to you because it's the app that's been downloaded by a large amount of people. But that doesn't tell you Instagram is successful natively. You have to look at underlying metrics as well. How many people actually continue using it today? So usage becomes a really important factor in determining that. The the way we say is if you can't act on it, it's not data, it's trivia. Another one that I really like is if you have ever interacted with e-commerce platform. So in my case, I'll take an example of Amazon because everybody is familiar with it. If Amazon says on my platform, I have $100 billion worth of products, right? Wow, sounds like a great number. But it's completely useless for anybody because if Amazon does not have any users, that $100 billion worth of product means nothing, right? It's just something sitting in a store somewhere in a storehouse, which nobody else is able to buy. And so that doesn't really tell you anything about that product. So What's the antidote to a vanity metric? Is an actionable metric. These are metrics that refine genuinely, define user experience and business health. We will touch upon this a bit later as well. We want to measure what actually drives product adoption and retention, right? Retention meaning the percentage of users who consistently return to your product over time. um, right, is the ultimate truth teller in your product management. Like if somebody is returning to your product, that means they have installed it. That number will automatically go up. They are signing up. They are going in and they're doing that critical thing that you think is important for people to be staying on the product, right? Is the right is the if your retention is high, you have achieved product market fit. It is if it's low, no amount of brilliant marketing or sales can save your product. If you are building a new startup, if you're doing something, the way you find product market fit is not by seeing how many people are willing to pay the first time. You want to see how many people are willing to pay the second and the third and the fourth time. So if they continue to spend money on your subscription, right? So it's very easy to get downloads up. You say first month is free. All premium features are available to you. Suddenly your numbers on the top line will go, right? But then next quarter, next month, when they come in, you're like, now it's going to cost you $20 a month. And the customer's like, well, this wasn't worth $20. Cancel, right? Cancel subscription. With that in mind, we cannot focus on just the people who downloaded because we provided a free subscription. We have to focus on the people who are still paying. And if that number goes high, that is the ultimate product market fit. If you look at ChatGPT, it has a lot of free users, right? People who are using the free tier. But when you ask them to pay, nobody pays. But in the case of Anthropic, right, the repeat usage for people who are actually buying, they don't have a like very good free tier. But people who are used to it and repeatedly buying, that number is just growing up and up and up every day. So that's what the difference between a metric that doesn't make sense to a metric that really helps. Now, we're going to talk about a case study where the just ship it failure, right? So let's talk about what happens when organizations ignore this, right? Consider companies that raise massive amounts of venture capital and launch with huge fanfare. Oh my God, this company is the best company in the world. Look how much money they have raised. Which is also I kind of find a bit weird, where raising money is kind of like a signal for how great we are. It's not. A lot of different companies have raised a lot of money and they have gone bankrupt. We know about WeWork. We know about a couple of other companies where they raised a lot of money. I think it was Theranos' company. I forgot what it's called. But you raise money, but then you don't find people willing to pay for it. At some point your system is gonna drop off, right? So um they have aggressive shipping velocity, massive marketing output, but they completely fail to measure the right outcomes that we talked about in the previous slide. They build a product. They build a product based on assumptions. They track vanity metrics like day one signups, how many people showed interest, but fail to drive retention because the core product doesn't solve a real friction point, right? They arrive at the wrong destination, burning millions of dollars in the process. If I cannot get people to come back to me, take an example. Let's say today I build a personal expense tracker. If you go to the Play Store, there's going to be 100,000 apps that just do that. It's not really a pain point that anybody has. People have their own way of tracking personal expense. Some may be doing a great job. Some may have retained customers from their previous user base. Some may not be doing it. So, from the overall perspective, you want to make sure that the problem you're solving is a true customer friction pain point. And the only way you can come there and know about that is if you talk to the actual customer, say, hey, can you show me how you do this today? And then the customer will like, sure. And everybody likes to talk about their problems. That's human nature, right? And PMs have to be a bit of both kind of like a business person and a psychologist as well, and to understand what's really happening. And so when they look at, oh, you are doing this manually, this is time consuming or this is frustrating. Let me find a way how I can replace it with software and make it really, really easy. And that's the mindset that somebody needs to have when they're talking about, shipping products. So, how do we track the right things before it's too late? Um, I talked about what's wrong. We never talked about what's right, right? We must master the difference between leading and lagging indicators. A lagging indicator tells you what has already happened in the past, right? Leading indicator is kind of predictive. It tells you what will happen in the future. And as a PM, you need to pivot your roadmap to target leading indicators. If you only look at lagging indicators, you are attempting to, steer your product while staring solely in the rear view mirror, right? It's about how can you drive if you're looking back, right? You can't. You have to focus forward, and you need to see how fast that car is coming. When is the lane changing? Do I have a stop sign somewhere? You have to understand all of these things and predict the behavior and act accordingly. So examples of lagging indicators, the biggest one, revenue, churn, NPS scores. These happen when things have already happened. Like churn is a measure of how many people left. Well, it's great to help us understand what the situation is and how we could improve it. But by the time we measure it, the bad stuff has already happened. The user has left the platform. They have stopped paying. And that's what you don't want, right? So how do we pivot to more indicators, like how frequently are they engaging? Because if you see engagement being low on something, um, because when it should have been high, these users are at risk of churn. And so you could do something to keep them back, right? Instead of acting when they have already left the platform, which is something that we have to keep in mind. Um, so the most common mistakes, at least new product managers make, is obsessing over revenue. Um, I have made that mistake. I think everybody does because when they look at, oh, the product area that I own or I'm managing looks after, I don't know, $100 million worth of business, and you feel very important. I mean, I would feel too as well, but you should focus on, is that $100 million going to be consistent? Am I growing it? Or am I, getting it to decline? So the question around ARR is, we don't directly control revenue. Like if you go to a company, sorry, let me just have some water. If you go to a company um, where you sell a big product and your features or products are a part of that product, there is usually never a good way to understand out of all the business the company does, how much does your product area contribute to it. Now, keeping that in mind, uh, um, here's the secret, right? You will never be able to control revenue. You will be able to control the things that support the revenue in some way, because ARR is the result of a good product. By the time your ARR drops, customers have already been unhappy for months. They have churned. It's far too late for your product team to reverse the damage. There are no backseas. There is no reversal in product management, unfortunately. So you have to protect what you have, like a soldier on the castle, right? You have to say, I will not let my product fail. So I have to know everything that's happening within the castle. So how do you find your input metric, right? If we don't manage revenue directly, what exactly do we manage? We focus on finding your input metrics. Inputs are the actionable leading indicators that you can directly control, which eventually lead to the output of revenue. So you need to start managing the specific user friction that blocks revenue. Your strategic job is to find the bottleneck, right, in the user journey, quantify it, and clear it out. If we can do that, then we are in a very good position to say, okay, I know how my product works and I understand it really, really well. Now, this bucket is kind of just an example, but it's like you have new sales coming in, but your churn is kind of taking it away. And so your bucket is always going to remain the same level. It's never going to overfill, which is what you really want. So this is an example from my own workplace, one of the workplaces. So imagine you are managing a B2B software tool, in my case, my company, and you notice your revenue growth is sluggish. The number of users you have on the platform is consistent. It's not changing, right? It's barely like adding like some users every week or so. Now, if you're in my situation, you're not looking deep inside, you're looking overall. You're like, you know what? I think sales is not doing a good job of selling my product, right? And because sales is not doing a good job of selling my product, maybe that's why I'm not getting new users. That's why my revenue is not going up. But then you kind of question, how do I confirm that? So I would go and talk to my sales team. Like, hey, sales team, what are you doing? Are you doing a good job at addressing churn? Are you doing a good job at expanding your portfolio? And the sales team says, well, yes, I am adding consistently 20 users per week. And then you take a look at your graph and you say, it's not showing up as paid customers on my account. And they're like, interesting. And then when you realize that, you're like, oh, that means whatever sales is adding, you know, this particular bucket, whatever the sales is adding from the top, somewhere those customers are being lost. And I have absolutely no idea. This was a new product that I just started working on. And so I was like, okay, let me go back and see how many users we are, losing every week. And turns out, as many number of users we added, the same number of users we were leaving. That's why our growth was flat, our revenue was flat, right? If you take from the same pie and add it to the same pie, the pie remains the same size. So then I dug a bit deep. I'm like, let me see what are they doing with the product. Like this is just normal curiosity and inquisitiveness that drives you towards an answer. So like, okay, they purchased. Then I looked at how many actually started setting up the product. And it turns out about 90% of them did. Like, great. That means they went ahead one step. And then I went ahead and looked at, well, how many completed the setup? And turns out only 40% did. Out of that, 30% did become like repeat usage customers, but only 40% out of the 90% basically completed the setup. So what you discover through the data that 60% of the users were abandoning the product during the complex onboarding phase. So suddenly your mindset shifts and then you think, okay, if I solve this thing, this very specific particular thing, then users will stop dropping. That means I will be able to keep them back in my product. That means the growth for ARR that the new users are adding will continue to happen. See how I never obsessed about the ARR. I obsessed on what's the point where things are broken. And so your input metric, key input metric, which you can measure today, right, is setup completion rate. And if you can get users to finish setting up their account, they will, if you don't get them to set up the account, they will never experience value. They will never pay you in the future, and they will never they will never remain with your product. So setup completion is a highly actionable leading indicator of revenue. You know it today because it's bad. The customer may not leave until next month. So you have the time between today and the start of next month to, engage the customer back again. And with that in mind, once you have identified your leading metric, in my case, it was the setup completion rate, you can now define goals. You're like, hey, once you identify that specific user friction, your job as a PM becomes incredibly clear. You go to your engineering and design partners and say, for the next month, we are entirely focused on increasing setup completion from 40 to 60%, right? You aren't handing them what they need to build. That's not decided yet. You are giving them a problem to solve. You're saying, help me get this number up. And then starts the entire important process, which is, what are the solutions to this problem that will help me get where I want to be? So you aren't handing them a rigid list of features to build. You are handing them um, a problem to solve, but and this empowers your technical team to be creative and find the most elegant technical solution to achieve that desired outcome. You're not even saying, go fix my sign-in page. How do you know if fixing the sign-in page is even going to impact this, right? So from here, you have to break down the things that are actually wrong. How do you do that? Talk to your customers. They will tell you what they found difficult, what they found easy, what they did not. Look at your sources of feedback. There's going to be customer feedback forms. There's going to be, community posts. There's going to be Reddit feedback. There's just so much, people love to talk. If you ask people to talk and tell their honest opinion, they will. And so use that as product managers to get to where you need to. So we identified the source. Sorry, we said we are not going to focus on revenue. We said we identified the metric that is important to me. We told the team, aligned them around the input metric. And then what do we do? This is the strategic part, right? We do the roadmap pivot. So before, when you were not thinking about it straight as a product manager and you were in an illusion, you were adding features, you were working on sales enablement tools, you're refining the UI because you were trying to sell more, right? You were trying to aid in selling more. But those users would not have remained in the system at some point. You would have kind of given up. But after this, now you can focus on the solutions. How do you remove the barriers to value? So one of the solutions could be auto configuration. Ask a user a series of questions and just configure it automatically. Simplify the onboarding. If you think there are things that don't need to be answered in that journey, remove them from the journey. Ask them later. Don't ask too much detail from a person. Maybe just ask for some credit card information, let them try it. And once they go for renewal, ask them to input all that information. You really don't need everything in the first day. Use pre-built templates based on situations. If you give users options, they have a much better idea on which path they want to go down on. You select that, they go ahead. You can add a getting started wizard. How do I kick off with my product? Now, when you look at it, we didn't try to improve the product's bells and whistles. We improved the path to the product, right? We said your gold, we told the user, your gold is at the end of the road, but your road is broken. Let me fix that road so that you can walk yourself and find that gold, right? That's the motivation we have. We improved a path to the product. We gave the speed. We are still going to be developing really fast. The engineers are still going to build it really fast, but now we have a goal that we're going to achieve. We have a direction, and that's the point that we alluded to in above. That speed without any direction is just a faster way of arriving at the wrong place. So, but before you let engineers write a single line of code to fix that setup friction, you must do one critical thing. You must establish something called baselines. A baseline is your starting point. If you don't know exactly what your setup completion rate is today, you will have no mathematical way of proving that a new product update actually improved it tomorrow. So always measure the before state to prove your ROI. The way to think about this is, let's say you measured your setup completion rate through a very complex manual process today. It is impossible for you to continue to do that every single week and see where your numbers are growing. So invest in tracking metrics, work with your analytics team, with your data analytics team in your organization when you join, and say, hey, can you please help me track this in an automated fashion on a on a weekly basis? Once you do that, you are in a situation where the growth will just, it will be visible to you. You can share the with anybody out there in your organization, your leadership, your manager, your stakeholders, and they will exactly know what is needed. One thing, important thing that I failed to say was it's not just the team that needs to work around the input metrics, also the your immediate vicinity of stakeholders. If they understand that this input metric is important, they're all going to be checking through that. Every PM has to go through processes like weekly business review, quarterly business review, where you talk about how your performance has been of the product in terms of the metrics you define. And people have to agree to this metric as being the most important thing that they need to track. Without that, you're going to lose the lose the trust and not be able to get to where we need to be. Important thing is, a product manager cannot work alone. They need investment in their area, and they need blessings of the people around them to support their narrative. And all of this is really important to get that. So that was a lot about what we shouldn't do when we are looking at as product management as a function focused on measuring performance and moving ahead. The next section is about the landscape of product management is shifting very rapidly. Like for engineering, it's doing happening for PM as well. As you step into the PM roles today, you will inevitably work with AI and highly complex machine learning products, and this requires rigorous ROI measurement for modern tech. The fundamental rules of product management do not change, but the complexity of measuring them does. So AI features are often like quite black boxes. They behave probabilistically, not deterministically. What that means is, if you have a rule-based product which says if this then that, you are always going to get the same answer. But if you use AI tools, you just change one word in the input and the output can feel completely different. And so we have to have measurements where we can use to determine mathematically what's happening. And therefore, you need a concrete methodology for measuring success in complex environments which use AI. First one is when measuring AI, like you must be incredibly careful to avoid what I call the 10% overestimation trap, specifically in AI implementations. So this happens when a company launches a trendy new AI feature, sees a slight organic bump in overall user engagement, and the product team falsely attributes 100% of the success to their new AI tool, right? This happens a lot. And this is wrong in several ways because they're overestimating the impact, right? To secure more funding, to say, the AI stuff works, just give me more money and I will build it. And eventually you realize that the growth was actually due to a seasonal trend, because people buy more in Christmas and during Christmas time. So the numbers went up, but they launched an AI feature at the same time. So attribution is really difficult. Or broader market shift, like maybe the whole market has moved to like a new regulation, which could bump things up or down depending on what the situation may be. So, how do we avoid this trap in production, right? We must avoid the trap of overestimating impact. You can do this through rigorous A/B testing and holdout control groups. If you want to know if your new AI recommendation engine actually drives ROI, you should only expose it to 50% of your users, right? The other 50% will get like the old version um, as it was. Then you compare the outcomes, right? So it's about isolating the impact of the specific launch that you are doing and seeing whether it has any impact on that particular thing that you launched it for. So the other 50% get the old version. Then you compare the outcomes. If both groups grew at the exact same rate, your AI feature contributed zero to the to the feature, to the capability. And so you should conclude that there is no delta and you successfully avoided the overestimation trap. So A/B testing is really important in scenarios where you are launching new things. That this is not specific to AI, but anything else as well. Like Facebook tests a lot, Meta tests a lot with like A/B testing through placement of the buttons, the controls, whether it works or doesn't work. But we can A/B test with like new feature launches as well. Only thing for A/B tests is you need to have a large sample size of users who you're testing it with. When the number is small, let's say 50, 100, the numbers are not conclusive. You have to have like a large 3,000, 4,000, 10,000 plus user base for this to be tested. Also, tracking early signals, right? AI models also take time to learn, train, and mature. So you cannot always wait 3 months for the lagging indicators to show up if you are on the right track. And therefore, Your methodology must include tracking, early signals, like if you have revenue. If you launch an AI workflow assistant, an early signal isn't that this increases your revenue. An early signal is, are users accepting? Are they saying yes to the automated suggestions that the AI is generating? Or are they instantly saying, no, do this instead? So if you're overriding them, the AI is failing, and you need to iterate immediately to get to a good signal, which is like whatever AI suggested, people accepted it. So in this case, the input metric is acceptance rate of AI suggestions, which is a really good metric to determine the success and failure. The next one is tracking those early signals requires a delicate balance, right? You can't just focus on, hey, numbers, because quantitative data, the hard numbers in your database, right, they tell you what is happening. For example, users are overriding the AI suggestions 80% of the time. Great. But qualitative data like user interviews and feedback tells you why it is happening. For example, the AI suggestions, let's say, are um, between hallucinating irrelevant data. From the data, just from the data, what you would know is 80% of people are not accepting. But you would have no way to solve it because you actually don't know why they are doing it. And once you know that they're hallucinating irrelevant data, you can go ahead and fix that specific problem. Go back and see the numbers. If they go up, you solve the right problem. If you didn't, that means you didn't talk to enough customers to know what the problem is. So it's a very iterative feedback loop that keeps going on and on and on until you achieve that growth and fit. So exceptional PMs master both quantitative and qualitative. You cannot sit behind an analytical dashboard all day. You have to talk to your users to contextualize the metrics that are being put up. Um, and then and the last bit is actually AI actually saving you time. This is just from like what I think, for the perspective of this is also like when automation came in. I am a person who loves to automate. So if something takes me 30 minutes or 45 minutes to do every single week or 2 weeks, I would spend 30 minutes today and automate it so that I never have to spend that 45 minutes again. But then if the thing itself takes 5-10 minutes every time I need to do, and I'm spending 40 minutes on automation, then I will probably not even realize the value of it until like 5, 6, 10, 20 different weeks. And so you need to measure AI rigorously. You need a new methodology. You need to first establish how many minutes did the task take before AI. Then measure the acceptance rate. Like AI, as I said, is probabilistic. So 20-40% of the time, AI may not even be telling you the right results. And if you're not accepting those results, then all of that time is counted as an effort. So the slides will be shared, so use this if you want. So what the formula is, that this is the time that it takes for the manual task, right, minus the time it takes for waiting for the AI to generate something, and minus the time it takes for users to fact check and edit. All of that multiplied by the number of times you are actually able to accept the suggestion of AI. And if you use that, what you'll be finding is I save like 5 minutes per task instead of the real what it says 30 minus 1 minus 10, which is 11, like 20, like 19 minutes. That's not the case, right? Because you only are successful 40%, 25% of the time. So that's really how you should measure time savings. So if the ROI is negative, you're not going to invest in it. So right, rigorous PMs, measure the whole workflow together. So let's bring it all together into a very practical tool that you can use on day one of your product career, the actionability test. It's a very simple, powerful framework to audit your current KPIs. For every single metric on your dashboard, ask yourself this exact question: if this metric drops 50% tomorrow, what specific or immediate action will my team take? And if you don't know the answer, you are tracking the wrong metric, or you haven't looked into how what this metric even means. So if the metric fails the actionability test, and we talked about this in the beginning, is what we call a trivia metric. Trivia means quiz, quiz questions and answers. And so if I ask you, hey, what's the biggest lake in the world? What's the biggest freshwater lake in the world? And you would say Lake Baikal. But turns out that information did nothing absolutely to make any next action, right? It definitely made you fall in love with my geographic knowledge, but that's that's not important, I guess. So you must ruthlessly eliminate the trivia metrics that look good to the executives but fail to inform your next product decision, because trivia metrics clutter your dashboard, they confuse your stakeholders, and they distract your engineering teams from the true inputs that matter. The best PMs have dashboards with very few high actionable numbers, specifically the concept of a North Star metric. This is one metric that everybody behind your product agrees with and just tries to optimize for that. If your North Star metric falls down, people just go, oh my God, what's happening kind of a situation. So now let's talk about how to fix your dashboards on Monday morning, things that look interesting, but don't change how you behave. To clean this up, use the actionability test, audit every KPI you have to track. If it drops, you should know what it needs to do, right? And essentially, essentially, uh, don't fire the marketing department. That's not an answer. Something that those are in your control that you can influence. In a sprint, in 2 weeks, in 3 weeks, you can take an action and see the metric move. Focus on that. So these are some actionable steps. The next time when somebody asks you to check progress, audit your metrics, delete your vanity charts, identify your leaky bucket. Where are you losing people? Like, because losing people is the biggest reason why products do not succeed. Find your input metric, right? That's the setup completion rate, because of which there was a leaky bucket. Manage the behavior, not the result. Don't worry about the outcome. Don't worry about the ARR. Fix the problem, and the ARR will follow. Prioritize friction over features. What that means is, um, speed without direction is waste, and you should think about it. Adding friction to the process sometimes makes you want to think what the right thing is to do and go ahead. I was told that a lot of people are, looking out, or at a place where they would be looking at PM as a potential career, product management. And I just want to say, if you have any interviews coming up, anything important, the key thing to know is, for those who are actively interviewing in these roles, this entire framework is a competitive advantage, right? When an interviewer asks classic product sense questions like, how would you improve a product popular app? Let's say, I don't know, Snapchat. Most candidates will immediately start listing off like, oh, you know what? I feel we should have this, we should have this, we should have this. Again, the wrong problem. You will stand out by saying, first, I would like to define the outcome. The outcome, what is the outcome? Do I want to increase the signups? Do I want to do X? Do I want to do Y? Once you do that, and then you figure out what specific user friction are we trying to solve. This would establish the baseline and determine the actionable leading indicators we would track before we would even commit any engineering resources. So this is how a strategic product leader thinks, and bringing that out in your interviews or any next steps would be really, really great and helpful. So that was the end of it. I will pause here for questions. Remember, refuse to be a feature factory and focus on outcomes over outputs.
Okay, great, guys. You can ask for questions in the chat. So we will be waiting for them.
So I have a question from Leila. Thank you for the lecture. Um, that's a really good question. So question is, how can a product manager help the team shift the mindset from shipping features to actually measuring user impact? This is actually the key um difficulty that a lot of PMs face, is because as a PM, you're not a people manager. Nobody's reporting to you. Their performance is not in your hands, right? So you have to prove things through data and through evidence, right? Think about it as how you would run a court case, right? Unless somebody can be proven guilty with evidence, right? And anybody could be in that court, a commoner, a king, or anybody, right? If there is evidence to prove and people around you look at that evidence and say, this seems logical, then you have automatically built the trust that you need to get that happening. So if it's not working for your engineering team, convince the people around you who are invested, your stakeholders, who have a say in the engineering team's actions of funding. Get your manager on board, get your manager's manager on board, get your engineering manager on board, right? So the the way to figure this out is you have to try and you have to see how people are responding. That's the only way this science exists, right? The It's a complex people-based role, and so you have to understand people and know a lot about people. Um, and the other question you had, Leila, was how can we clearly distinguish between vanity metrics and truly actionable metrics when analyzing product performance? I think this question and the other question, which is outputs and outcomes, are kind of in the similar zone. So I'm going to answer them together. Um, a vanity metric, the litmus test is if you look at that metric, and as the question says, if it falls down 50% tomorrow, do you know what's happening, right? Let's say if the temperature tomorrow falls down 20 degrees, you know it's going to be really cold outside and I need to be prepared for it by, if I'm going out and I have something to do tomorrow, I have to wear my big jacket, right? Or the more heavy jacket. But a lot of these things are not as apparent. For example, if your revenue stays the same month on month, it tells you nothing. And like in this example that we saw today, you could have a situation where your revenue is remaining constant. You're like, great. It's neither going up, it's neither going down. Revenue is horizontal, but you are losing customers, and eventually, when sales stops bringing in new customers, your revenue is going to go down. So that's why it doesn't tell you much. You have to focus on what are the inputs, sorry, what are the outcomes, right, that are truly matter. If people get to use a product, one thing that I failed to mention, your outcomes don't remain the same every year. So let's say you fix the outcome for the leaky rate, right? um, let's say you fix the setup completion rate in this example that I talked to you about. What then? Well, then you're going to move on to the next problem, and that is no longer going to be your key metric. So at some point, you will keep updating every year. When your company defines new strategy, you're going to have to find a new metric that moves the needle in the direction that you want to be. I hope that answers the question. Okay, the other one from Leila is revenue and ARR are lagging indicators. What are some practical examples of leading indicators that product managers should monitor on daily basis? The answer is it depends on the context of your product. Definitely, uh, count of weekly active users, depending on the product. Some products have monthly active usage that makes sense. Some products have like weekly active usage. Some products need to have daily active usage monitoring. And the word active is really important. Daily active usage doesn't mean I logged into Snapchat today, you know, looked at a couple of pictures and stopped. I am not a daily active user, right? A daily active user needs to have a definition which says somebody who at least posts one picture or shares pictures with at least two friends, because this is the person who is engaging with your product. So your definition of daily active usage and weekly active usage, where active and defining what active means is really important, is like a common metric, but then your leading product indicators could be very, very different based on the situation. In my case, it was the setup completion rate. SS has a question. Why can shipping many features be misleading when measuring product success? I think this is exactly what the presentation was about, which is you can ship many features, but what happens if your revenue doesn't go up? Would you be a team that your like you as a product manager and engineering team, that your leadership would be like, well, this team is not delivering any outputs. Their product developments have no impact on the ARR, because no matter who a leader is, everybody cares about the money that it is bringing in. But if you care about the money that is bringing in, you won't be able to bring in the money. That's the problem. You have to think about deeper things, where you are focused on high value features. So yeah, sure. I think we had an example of vanity metric and actionable metric in the presentation. I'm just going to quickly jump to that. I had actually a bunch of them. So we'll talk about. So number of downloads of an app is a vanity metric, right? An actionable metric is weekly active users of the app. So tomorrow, if people stop downloading your app, that's not gonna make a big difference. But if the people who are using your app suddenly drop, let's say you launched a new update of the app on your Play Store or App Store, and you notice your weekly active usage go down, your app downloads are going to be unaffected because people are going behind the hype, they're still downloading the app. But if people who are actually using the app, and let's say that update had something wrong, they can no longer sign in and do the favorite thing that they were doing, they will not be able to log in, and that metric will drop. So what you will see is, oh my god, my weekly active users drop, I have to go and check what happened. Probably it's because I did three or four things that happened. So this is a good example of a vanity metric versus a leading metric. Engagement and retention are usually very good, sorry, actionable metrics in general. Okay. Any other questions? Okay.
If anyone have another questions, please ask them. Let's wait a minute.
Feel free to scan the lovely looking QR code that I built to look like LinkedIn. Hopefully that will help you find me on LinkedIn without any problems.
Okay, I want to ask you some questions from me. Maybe you have some steps. How can we tell early that the product has a retention problem?
Um, the question that you ask is has so many different answers depending on what product you are working with. I think the first one to see is um, your 90-day churn. So every user who signs up in your system has um, has a unique ID, right? And you can see if they're logging in or not at a certain point in time or not. So once you know if they have logged in the last 90 days, right? And 30 days and 60 days. This is a very good number that's usually tracked is 30 days sign up retention, 60 days in retention, and 90-day retention. And if you see that the numbers are dropping after 60 days, that means your product has a problem in which in the product has a problem in which scenario where after 60 days something happens which the users are not able to sign in, or they're not able to, they don't want to be in your system. So there are different ways to measure retention. In my scenario, in my product, it was on a weekly basis, how many people are no longer tied to that sales SKU that they bought in the beginning of their contract. If I can't find them anymore, that means they dropped, and I have evidence on when they dropped because I'm tracking them. So that's how I was using that. The other question that I have is, why do companies still rely on vanity metrics if they can be misleading? Because vanity metrics are so easy for people to feel important, right? And also, it's not like a lot of companies are relying on it. It's just that when people go into this world of product management, big numbers sound nice, right? Big numbers have sounded always nice, and as a result of which people, talk about that a lot more, and we have to pivot away from it. A lot of companies have moved on, but it's just a lesson that I think as a fresh product manager, somebody always needs to keep in mind, because big product managers, big numbers can be easily swayable, like they can sway people. The other question was, why is customer retention considered such an important metric for product? Very good question. I think the answer to that is, how do you ensure your product keeps giving money back to the company, right? If your customer does not stay on the product, your revenue will drop. So imagine you are not signing up any new customers. You have 100 customers who are paying you $20 a month, which means 100 into 20 is, I think, $2,000 a month is your revenue. And every month, 10 customers keep dropping. In next 20 months, you are going to be at zero revenue. But if you retain those customers, they will keep paying you 20,000, 2,000, 2,000 every month. Otherwise, what will happen? One month you are earning 2,000, the next 1,980, 1,960, and within 20 months you will be all out of the play, right? So we have to keep that in mind from a retention perspective, that it's important for your bottom line. Okay, if there is nothing
Thank you.
else,
Yes.
thank you for your time. I hope you can take these frameworks back to your teams and rekindle that customer obsession when you start working in the corporate world.
Thank you so much for the lecture. I think it was so useful for us. And thank you to the audience who asked questions. It was a good questions. So have a nice evening to everyone. Have a nice day to our guests. We were so happy that you had this lecture. So see you. Goodbye.
Thank you again for giving me this chance, and have a rest of the week. Good rest of the week. Bye bye.
Goodbye.